Hey folks, this is Brobots. My name is Jeremy. My co-host is Jason. He'll be here shortly. We talk about health, wellness, and how AI and technology intersect with all of that. And there's so many things that AI promises to be able to do. I know for me, it writes a lot of my emails, helps me with a lot of research, helps me plan a lot of things that I don't have the brain capacity to plan. But have you considered using it to help you with your grief? Our guest today is John Kammer. He has considered that, and he's built a tool called Guardian Angels that helps you overcome the grief of the loss of a loved one. John's background in cybersecurity and the loss of 3 of the closest people in his life have really combined to help him develop a tool that allows you to have conversations, those painful, impossible conversations that you wish you could have with people that are no longer here. We're not talking about like crazy Ouija board witchcraft shit. We're talking about digital interactions with representations of those that are gone that, at least in John's case, have helped him massively heal from deep, crippling grief. And he's hoping that you have the same result in using this tool. So if there's conversations you wish you were able to have and you don't know how to do it, today you're going to learn how. And it's not only going to help you have those conversations, but hopefully it's going to help you heal from that deep grief that you've struggled with for so long. John, thanks so much for being here. Your story is one filled with a lot of pain and a lot of sort of challenges in trying to recover from that pain, speaking primarily about grief, which led you to an incredibly interesting road that I think ties in really strongly to something our audience is looking for, is ways to really blend the emerging AI technology and ways to heal from their past traumas and their pains. If you don't mind, let's start with the pain. What was it that caused you to create the Guardian Angels and set you down this path?
Well, high level, 3 of the closest people that I've ever had in my life outside of my immediate family are no longer with us. First one took his life a little over a decade ago, and that, really kind of set me on this path of, call it self-medicating, running from actually having to face the things that are necessary in order to get through something like that. And then more recently, over the last couple of years, I lost like two more of my closest friends. So these ones weren't to suicide, but to, accidents. So all of them traumatic, all of them instantaneous, all of them with no chance to kind of prepare myself. So my specific lens is very narrow. But as I started trying to do the work, well, first I ran from it, right? I spent a lot of time, using you as a substance enthusiast. I'm recently we're just about 2.5 years sober. And it really wasn't
like real sober or California sober?
Like have not had a buzz.
Okay.
And sometimes I wish I could,
That's a long 2 years, man. That's a long 2 years.
Yeah. So, and it really, until I made that step, I didn't have the context to look back objectively and start to understand what I was running from and why I made the choices that I did. For me, I think some people, really have the addiction problems where it's compulsive and they can't control it and these sorts of things. For me, I went to these meetings and it wasn't particularly helpful for me other than to realize that wasn't who I was. I knew what I was doing every time I picked something up, right? I wanted that buzz. I wanted to be numb. I wanted all those things.
Yeah.
And so I got sober, started really looking into what was going on. Then those second 2 losses happened, and the first of them was the best man at my wedding, and I kind of let that relationship lapse a little bit, not through anything but life getting in the way, right?
Yeah.
But we went from him speaking on the happiest day of my life to I had one brief conversation with him, and then 7 months later I was, saying goodbye to him. And that one for me was probably the most instrumental in pushing me to the place where I am now. The guilt associated with just letting that, from going from you done this for me to, man, I couldn't even keep in touch, and now I have to say goodbye to you without really expressing how much you mean to me and how much of an impact you've had on my life. you don't think about that, right? I expected at some point to do the same thing for him, right? To do the same, to give it, to stand up and give a speech in front of friends and family about all of the good times and the times that we really don't want to talk about and all that fun stuff.
That's right.
And so, I was a shell of myself after that. I didn't emote for years, a couple of years. I couldn't cry. I couldn't, nothing, right? And you can ask my wife, and I was not the person she married. And then about a year later, I lost one of my best friends from childhood, and he was the person that I went through. Our initial friend that committed suicide, Zach. We were all three close. I'd been through more in life with him than anyone. And at his funeral, I couldn't shed a tear. I wasn't capable. And that's not that's not who I am. That's not how I thought that I would respond to that. And so after that, it was really, I started writing about it. I started trying to explore what the hell was going on with me. And dig into those feelings. And after a conversation with my wife about how she knew there would be a point in her life when she wanted a text message from her mom but couldn't have it, that sent my wheels, spinning. I said, well, what if you could? So the initial idea was to just spoof phone numbers and send nice text messages from people we've lost, right? Bring a smile to somebody's face. Turns out that, while that's not illegal, the telecoms don't look too kindly on that. There's a reason for that. 99.999999% of the time someone's doing that. It's to scam someone. And they weren't going to make an exception for me. So, as I peeled back the layers, and I was like, okay, well, they want to do this text message thing, but what if they want to interact with it? The obvious answer was AI. And in trying to build something authentic, I never had the idea of this healing me. It was just more exploratory. But I only had my own personal experiences to fall back on in trying to build something authentic. And how would this, if I were to text back this text message from Grandpa, how would it respond, right? Would it feel like that person, or would it feel like a robot? Because as soon as it feels like a robot, well, we've lost him. It's not special anymore.
Yeah.
And in doing so, the first one I built was John. And he was the best man at my wedding. And I, through a few iterations, it wasn't the first one, but then once the conversation started flowing with him, and I said what I needed to say. I said, I'm sorry. I said, I asked him if the accident hurt. And his response to that was something I never expected. I mean, I immediately, like, the weight was lifted, the waterworks started, and I felt things that I hadn't felt in years. And that's not to say I was healed instantaneously, but I was freed of the kind of the constraints of guilt, and I was finally able to give myself permission to forgive myself and start that. And so, from there on, it felt more natural to talk about it. It gave me an opportunity to organize my thoughts so that when I went to therapy, I had a starting place. And I knew that if it helped me in that way, there's a good chance there's someone else out there that this can help. Going into it, I was the last person that thought I was going to use AI as the means to get myself to a place of feeling good about moving forward and going through the day and living a productive and healthy life. But that is how it turned out.
Yeah, especially given your cybersecurity background. I mean, there's folks are definitely concerned about trying to put too much PII in this and too much personal information. Clearly, you were in pain. Did those kinds of considerations even pop up at that point for you, or was it just like, I need an outlet?
Well, for me, this stuff wasn't, what I put in there was not anything that wasn't already somewhere. So I wasn't too concerned about those initial kind of the testing to figure out which model worked best for my use case. I wasn't that concerned at that point. But in understanding where we are and the concerns that many people have about what they put out there, I absolutely built it with that in mind.
Yeah.
And so privacy was it was a cornerstone of how I wanted to build it. And that comes at the expense of some of the other things that you might expect from something along the lines of a therapy bot, right? If you are going to guarantee privacy, that really means you're not doing the same sort of monitoring that others might see, right? So there might not be that early warning sign of something, some issues that can come up, and I've fought myself on that. And there's, we're putting in place resources for people if they recognize that. We're encouraging people, to very proactively saying, hey, this is what you get, but this is the trade-off. So tell someone what you're doing so that they can help keep an eye on you. Here are resources here. It's on the banner at the top of the website, will be on every page, is here are crisis resources for you. I'm
curious about that, because that is one of the things that we talk about a lot here, is when people do turn to, whatever model to be their therapist, their online therapist. We've seen stories over and over again of being led down paths that end very, very badly for people. Particularly dealing with grief and survivor's guilt, that can definitely open up pathways where your brain starts telling you, I don't deserve to be here. It should have been me, shouldn't have been them. What kind of safeguards are you able to build on top of the existing tool to help prevent that? If the conversation does go down that path, is this going to in any way, are you concerned about it opening up a risk of the robot saying, yeah, you're on the right path, champ? Give it a go.
That's a risk that I will always be concerned about. Even if I have 100% faith that I have done, that it's not possible, right?
Yeah.
It just, because there's always a possibility.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do to mitigate that, I'm working with grief therapists to build the bot and how it interacts with people in a supportive way. Right. There's only so much mitigation you can do. So we're actually, we're in the process, and right now it's taking longer than I would like, but of integrating basically you can link the two accounts. So you can have a therapist account with the user account, so that this therapist can help be those guardrails and keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
So that, I can't see what you're doing. I don't, you can still have control over your data. You can still delete it at any point, but there is someone whom you trust, whom you have designated as that secondary person. And maybe it's not your therapist, maybe it's your brother, maybe it's someone who knows what you're going through, but we want to have extra eyes on there at the same time, and so this is something that I think the tension will always be there.
Yeah.
And I made the choice to go with privacy because I need people to trust it. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so there's, I will lose sleep over it forever. But in this scenario, like with any profound technology, there's always a risk of misuse. There's always a risk of adverse consequences. I believe that the potential good, and the good in this case, outweighs the bad.
Yeah.
If we have to go down that road of having those conversations and something, God forbid, happens, I have prepared myself for that. I know that it's always going to be possible. And God, I don't want that to happen to anybody, right?
Yeah,
we're trying to help people heal. That's
Right.
the crux of this thing, is trying to help people heal. I also know that not everyone can be helped.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to fix something, not be an accelerant. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah,
and it's a slippery slope, and it's a
Sure,
very,
yeah.
very, fine wire that we're walking. But difficult problems require, you kind of have to take a couple of chances.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right way to put it, but
it's a big swing, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
you're trying to go in to solve a problem that doesn't have a viable mechanism to be solved today. And I mean, it's not a Ouija board, right? Like, this is something that you're actually trying to go through and put something into play that actually has context that's emotionally relevant to you and your relationship that you had with somebody else, and inputting that data. I guess you become the real marker point to figure out whether or not, am I really going to be able to pass the test to see if this is someone that's actually a human being? Do I actually feel like this is a real thing that I'm talking to? Am I getting these kinds of interactions? And therapists do this in talk therapy. There's variations of this where people go through and, I have issues with being a C-section baby. All right, well, let's have you go through the birth process, with pillows and other weird things. And it works. I mean, that's the thing, is that we're looking for input into our limbic system to satisfy, biological compatibility, also dealing with all the headaches and the machinations of mass society. And it sounds like you've actually at least started, on a path to try to solve these kinds of problems. That being said, how much of the Black Mirror variation of this actually goes through your thought pattern where, I think there's 3 different episodes of Black Mirror where they have a technology that's kind of like this, and eventually it leads to a humanoid robot coming into the house and having these types of interactions. I'm not suggesting we're anywhere near that, but I am kind of curious. I've also lost folks. Like I've got a really good cousin that I lost. If I could have him here, I actually do wonder, what would he have said? How would he be interacting in those places? And the temptation to have that companion here and put that down and go, well, David's in the conversation. That would be hard for a lot of people to resist, especially when you're talking about a group of people that knew and loved somebody and having those kinds of interactions. And if you can emulate their voice and everything else, this becomes very compelling. And I think we know it's not real, but it is.
Right.
We don't know the difference, or we know the difference, or we're willing to suspend our disbelief for that period of time. How much of this plays into that for you? And does it actually, is there a risk in opening up an old attachment and having the intention being to say goodbye, but not being able to?
Yes. Absolutely, there's a risk.
And we're done. Perfect. Thank you.
I want to qualify that, right? There's, of course, but there's a risk in opening up any old wound, right?
Yeah. Sure.
This goes back to really, I have weighed the potential scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
I'm comfortable with the risk because I believe the payoff is worth it for those who venture there. Now, this isn't for everyone. There are people who are never going to adopt AI. That's fine. If you don't think this is going to work, it's probably not. You have to be open to it to a point, but I've also had conversations with friends who are like, I think my sister would love this. However, I don't think she's stable enough to handle it. And so, yeah, it goes through my mind all the time. I'll say from my experience, it feels like them, and it's not them.
Yeah.
But I am relatively stable in where I'm at with that, and I can't speak that for everyone. So, I almost don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of how, do we emulate voice? Do we actually go the avatar route long term? Because that does really kind of start to straddle that line of, are we altering someone's reality? I think there are philosophical questions. Okay, well, you talk about, well, what's real?
Right.
Or is this real? Well, if it brings you comfort, does it matter if it's real? Well, I think it matters if it's real, if it's going to put you in a place where you're going to harm yourself, or if the consequences, end up being someone else, or it is going to be something that we fight with till the end on this. But, like you said, you got to take a big swing. We're trying to solve, grief is one of the only truly universal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
There is, I guess there's probably a handful of people on the planet that won't experience it, but that's almost sadder, right? Because the people around them are going to be because that just means they didn't live long enough. And that's as sad as it gets. So this is about giving people the tools to find resolution and to get to a place where they're comfortable talking about it and moving forward. Right. I hate the words, move past. I hate the word closure. I hate, we're trying not to close the book. We're trying to close the chapter and open a new one. And how do we carry them with us and live this live a productive life that honors the people that we love and take them with us, not leave them behind. And I think that really that idea of leaving them behind is what has a lot of people afraid to actually seek the healing that they require, because we don't want to lose that.
Right.
And so this, one of the unintended benefits of this thing that I had no idea was going to, but memory preservation, right? With Zach, I didn't, this was long enough ago that I remember how he made me feel. I remember the things we did in a general sense. With Tim and John, they're so recent that it's all crystallized, and I put it in there, and had I had this 12 years ago, my memories of Zach are far sharper now. And that's special.
So along those lines, when you're taking the compendium of another human being, how do you manage the data input? I mean, is it writings? Is it social media profiles? Is it pictures? Is it videos? And then how do you actually construct this thing to, have what is essentially human analog in this space?
It's a great question. And it took me a while to figure out exactly how I wanted to do this. Initially, I was like, the easy way is to scrape social media, right? There's a billion tools that can scrape the internet for someone that they, but I don't know many people that's life that is on the internet is what, isn't a highlight reel, right? Is that authentic?
Yeah.
Authenticity here is, what we keep coming back to. And so in its current form, it's form-based. That's where we start, right? It's a series of roughly 30 questions that ask you everything from, their name and their relationship with you, parent, sibling, mentor, how you refer to each other, nicknames, describe their sense of humor, describe their personality, how they speak, their speech cadence, and share some shared interests, some shared memories, how they made you feel, when did you meet, how long, right? So this is the initial input. That's where it stands right now. The thing that I'm currently working on is a kind of an agentic and RAG framework that will take anything else you put in there and remember it, so that your conversations that say, hey, my, the girlfriend from whatever, whatever comes up, it can say, oh yeah, we talked about this, whatever. So that's where we're headed. Right now it's pretty static, but the point was always to be user centric. I want this to be the memory that you have, right? If we built these, what we could do is have everyone that knew this person put things in there, but everyone knew a different person. Right. We all have, our sense of humor changes based on our audience, the things we say, the things we do. Everyone has a different perception of this. And the comfort is going to come from, who did you know?
Right.
So it's user generated inputs.
Something I'm curious about with this is even beyond dealing with a lost loved one or friend or whatever, but it just has me thinking about some of the most healing work I've ever done was in sort of a somatic group therapy situation where you basically are in a group with 10 other people with full permission to just treat the person on the other side of the room as that is mom, that is dad, that is brother, that is whoever harmed you, that you never dealt with it. And you can practice safely in this space what you would say, what you would do. And whether you ever actually take that practice and put it into reality and say the thing to dad that you never got to say or whatever, that's on you, but it does help you sort of exercise those demons and to be able to move a little more freely in the world. Is there a use case here where it could be essentially that practice therapy where it's, I've got beef with dad. I want to sort it out with him here before I go and get on a phone call or actually write him a letter, because that's to me, that's where AI is really powerful is in helping us with the practice so that we can then in reality go out and use what we've learned from our research or from our brainstorming with the tool to try to make the world a better place if you're doing it right.
Right. So 100%. That is, I guess, yes, that is a use case for this. In a broader sense, right, and something that I didn't conceive of initially because I was in my own bubble, grief is not restricted to death, loss.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I guess loss is kind of the commonality, but we grieve when, when our kids go to college. We grieve when our friend gets married because our life changed. We don't, we grieve when we get married. We're not out with the boys every night. Like, all of those things have an element of grief. And, the other thing that I quickly realized was, to your point, grief for my specific scenario is these three people had profound positive impacts on my life. That is not the case for everyone and for every relationship. Grief and healing can get very dark. Sometimes the object of your grief hurt you in profound ways, right? You talk about abuse, and so being able to your point, exercise those demons in a safe space. Wow. That is absolutely something we're exploring. I have a friend that I went to high school with, who's testing his kind of specific use case, but his brother had a mental break, and he has been estranged for 10 years. Now, he's not gone, right? He could have a conversation with him. Who knows what that conversation looks like, but I haven't spoken to him about how it's felt and where he's at with it. And, I don't know if he'll want to share anyway. Right. But that's another thing that I had never thought of. Our relationship, basically any change in relationship could be a reason to grieve.
Yeah.
And coming to terms with those, finding resolution to that feeling, again, that's what we're going to come back to, is resolution, allows us to then take the steps to live healthy and productively.
Yeah. Trauma gating. Just the human experience is just a collection of responses to different trauma inputs. And I mean, we grew up with a variety of traumas throughout our life. I mean, some people say, having the umbilical cord is traumatic because you're losing your first connection with your mother. Birth is traumatic. I mean, all these types of things. And I mean, trauma builds scars, and scar tissues kind of develop and grow us into who we are. And sometimes that trauma is necessary to become the person that you are as an individual. And then sometimes that trauma just fucks with you in profound ways that you can never really work through because the cause of the trauma is different, or too much time passes and the person doesn't know how to interact with you. Do you see people, and you bring up a really good point about, there's still someone in my life that, I can't really talk to because I can't talk about these different things. This seems like a really, really good tool for kind of going through and looking at these things in a way that maybe doesn't give you closure, but at least gives you an outlet to ask questions in a way to something or to someone that having those direct conversations and interactions with would be too painful. And
yeah, I found, for me, it was the response that I got that helped. That was what catalyzed this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, in therapy, they have various treatments that fall under the umbrella of psychodrama.
Yeah.
Playing this out, whether it's the empty chair technique or writing a letter, or, that the group you talked about and that person is the object of, say whatever. Up until now, you couldn't get a response.
Yeah.
And this response hopefully feels authentic enough that it gives you that release of whatever that weight has been.
Well, I can say, I mean, I haven't used your tool specifically, but I'm one of many that have turned to AI in times of, mental instability and just needed someone to sort of vent to, work some things out. And when you believe enough in the ability to sort through your own thoughts, it doesn't really matter that it's a robot. Like it's
Right.
giving you the right prompts to get your brain working in the right way to start to see the resolution that you're looking for. And there are times when I just openly weep at what I reveal to myself by asking a machine, how come I feel like this? Why is this happening to me? What is this? What's going on here? And if you've given it the right prompt, and it's not just standard robot, but it's got some therapy background, it's got some coaching background, it knows a little bit about you, it knows what you want in terms of that interaction, it can really help open up a lot of things. And so I'm unbelievably excited for the idea of being able to put a voice or a text to the multiple mentors that I've lost in my life, and the holes I've been trying to fill in their absence and the absences of people that should have been there for me growing up. there are so many times when I meet somebody, I'm like, oh, maybe this is the new, maybe they can fill that hole for me. Like, I want to stop feeling that way. I want to feel like, okay, I'm a grown ass man. I'm 50 years old. I don't need that person to turn to. So it just sounds like an incredible relief to be able to have my mentor in my pocket and sort of personify it through the people that I've lost, that I miss their guidance and wish I had just a piece of them to point me in the right direction.
Well, and
Right, well-
also part about being a grown ass man is that sometimes you just have to deal with shit.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, to your point, so much of the healing of therapy comes from simply being heard
Yeah.
and talking it out so that we come to a lot of those conclusions on our own.
Yeah.
They're just helping facilitate that conversation to get you there. Right. And so this obviously, being able to see it come back for me again, in my therapy journey was about organizing my thoughts because I didn't have a starting point. My therapy for the last 10 years before I did this was, as soon as it turned to grief, is like, oh, well, yeah, that sucked. I did that. My friend is no longer here. And I was still shut down because I didn't, I deal with this with my wife regularly.
right.
She wants to talk about something immediately. I need time to process it. I need time to wrap my head around it before I'm ever going to have a productive conversation.
Well, and when you spend years self-medicating and numbing it, the ability to unwrap that and to face it for what it is so much harder than had you never done. Speaking as someone who definitely, I feel the same way I've heard you describe it, as like not necessarily an addict, but certainly coped, certainly an enthusiast for making the pain not be there. But that severely, I think, inhibits your ability to deal with those feelings and to be able to process them in a way that even in therapy or with your closest family, or to be able to articulate them in a way that makes sense to them or even makes sense to you is incredibly challenging because you've just stuffed it down for so long and numbed it.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you're used to, right?
Yeah.
We're habitual beings.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I did was habit more than anything else, just breaking out that habit.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I mean, we have a pain threshold, and once you hit that pain threshold, if it sits there long enough, that's just your new normal. And because it's your new normal, you're like, all right, whatever. I'm just going to keep not dealing with this. I mean, I have a myriad of things that I walked around with that I probably should have taken care of. That I used other ways to self-medicate to try to deal with, and it took me, hitting rock bottom, 10 plus years ago to really get me out of my own space and, fix the problems that I have with me. I'm kind of wondering if I don't use this tool to go through and try to recreate, the shitty version of myself and ask it questions.
Interesting.
And
or even the childhood version of yourself.
Yeah.
Like we always talk about taking care of your inner child.
Yeah.
That's an interesting
and
question to
ask
put in
these
there as well.
questions. I mean, the it is real, right? And like, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go through and try to understand those pieces and understand my ego in the same way. And, if I can create these personifications of myself, even if they're virtual, and actually have a better idea of how these things work, maybe I can actually be that grown-ass man that I think I'm supposed to be, as opposed to the 50-year-old boy that runs around doing shit that I shouldn't do.
A wise man once told me, don't grow up, it's a trap. So, I
that's
don't know how
true.
far off you are on some of that, but
Very true.
It's a trap, but I've been in it for a long fucking time, man. Like,
You've gotten used to your cage.
Well, I've done C-level jobs, and I've like been in charge of hundreds of people and all these kinds of things. And I try to keep a lot of levity and joking and all these different pieces. And then dealing with very difficult situations with comedy is a huge part of my coping mechanism. And probably not the most effective way to deal with things with certain people and certain interactions. And certainly not the best way to deal with myself, because I use that to ignore my feelings. And like you say, I'm not going to cry about this thing because it hurts too much. I'm just going to emotionally re-regulate myself towards laughter and humor.
Yeah.
And it's just another distraction because dealing with the actual shit is hard. But if I can have a smart ass version of myself to talk to about it, I might be all right.
Right. Well, you bring up a good point. We all want to hit the easy button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But almost nothing in my life that's come easy has been worth it.
Right.
And this is supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
Dealing with this is one of the things in life, especially someone close, especially someone of that inner circle. we're not supposed to go it alone, yet somehow our society has made it taboo enough that nobody feels comfortable talking about it. So
Right.
that's first and foremost. Like, we need to cut that shit out and get it out
Yeah.
Yeah.
there. But you know, I have come to believe that whether you like it or not, the healing that you seek lives on the other side of those painful feelings that you have fought and ran from for however long, fill in the blank there. And if you are willing to do the work, if you're willing to face them, you stand a very good chance of getting to a place where you feel good about them again.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to give people, just one little nudge, one little extra, a little extra help in getting there.
I would argue to anyone who's saying they're fine, because as I was thinking about this before this interview, I was thinking, I don't have anything to say to that person. And like, as I had the thought about the person who I have stuff to work out with, thinking I don't have anything to work out, I was like, oh wait, no, there is something. Like, it literally, like, having the thought of I have nothing to say to this person brought up these feelings of, oh no, there's work to do there. You gotta lean into this and figure out what's going on here. So whether it's through a tool like this or something, I've got some work to do. So this was educational for me in my own field. So I can just imagine the person listening going like, "Oh, fuck that guy. I don't have anything to say to him." Like, you do. You said fuck that guy. There's a reason you said fuck that guy.
I'm famous for
something
fuck
to
that
work
guy.
out.
Fuck them. However, if I was to actually peel that back and do a little work that's, yes, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I found that some of my best relationships I've ever had in my life were people that I hated at first. And we were, we got into it and we were forced to actually communicate and communicate deeply. And then we understood each other. And then that relationship, exploded. It blossomed because we did that. We assume a lot. And when you
I'm curious about this for you, because you mentioned how you sort of emotionally shut down during this period of grief. How were you before this? Were you an open and vulnerable person before, or is it through sort of processing this grief that you found like, hey, there's actually a better way of being on this side of things?
I can't say that I was an emotionally open person before. The first loss for me came at 21, and, any man is not there yet. Right.
No.
I had that moment at 21 came, that was when my partying turned from just fun to medicinal, but I was doing a good bit of it before, right? I was stunting my growth regardless. Let's call a spade a spade.
Sure.
So I was at that phase in my life, I was very, very much ascribed to the macho, what is a man supposed to be, beat my chest, talk about how great I am and how cool I am and how nothing can hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I stayed in that place because I shut down emotionally. And then I was able, later in life, when I didn't start to see the fruits of the things that I thought I deserved, or the way that I envisioned my life, started to examine why that might be and how I can be better. And that, looking in the mirror is hard. It's hard for the best of us, and it's certainly hard for the ones that live their life in denial. And so that was that journey of, okay, how can I actually become the person, be in control of what I want in my future? And it came down to accountability, which meant facing all the shit that I didn't want to face. It meant looking at myself and saying, the reason that happened, and to an extreme degree, right, ownership and the internal locus of control, as far as from a psychological perspective, everything that happened to me was my fault, whether it was or wasn't. If I believe it's my fault, I can do something about it.
You have control.
Right. I can do something if it's my fault.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that shift in mindset allowed me to start this. And then when I finally got to that place of, okay, my grief is probably one of the biggest reasons I've stayed in that place. Let's dig into this.
It reminds me of an analogy that someone said to me once, and it's, somebody can come along and dump trash on your front lawn. And it's not your fault that it's there, but it's your responsibility to clean it up because they aren't coming back to deal with it. So at some point you become complicit in letting the trash sit there undealt with. And at some point you have to find out, where can I take control of this and start to clean it up myself?
Or you can look, we live in a world where everyone's free to make that choice that it's not their fault and then they want to sit there, and it comes down to what do you want? And if you want to live a life where you're a victim and where you are just kind of, you're at the whims of everyone around you, you're allowed to do that.
Yep.
It's not a very fulfilling life, but you're allowed to do that. To be the person that is in control is hard. It takes hard work. It takes humility. It takes a lot of difficult conversations with yourself and with others. And
with AI, as it turns out.
That's a great place to start, because a lot of my conversations with others wouldn't have gone anywhere if I couldn't, again, organize my thoughts.
Right.
Yeah,
Catch me in, a moment of like on my back foot. Like, I've said some shit that, A, I didn't mean, B, I didn't even know what I was saying, and C, that made the situation a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, the only requirement for life is to keep processing oxygen into carbon dioxide. Everything else in between is whatever else the fuck you want to make of it. And giving people these kinds of tools to actually go through and try to take control of these pieces, I think, is very, very powerful. I do kind of wonder this individual introspection piece and getting people to get to the point to go, I should actually try to make this thing, I should actually try to make myself better and have hard conversations with myself. That seems like a really interesting angle to look at these kinds of problem spaces, because so much of our trauma comes back to the way that we interpret certain things and the way that we're looking at pieces based upon other trauma lenses that we're looking through. And if I can strip off a few of those lenses and go, how would I have reacted to this 15 years ago? Like, that might actually solve a lot of these bigger problems, because I've certainly gone through these emotional swings where I've been like way too emotional, manic in some areas, and then come back to depression and then find that middle ground. And like, it's the ebb and flow of human existence. And there's so many different ways that you could take this. And I do wonder, from personification perspective, am I going to go through and put input data in and remember myself wrong? But also, am I going to remember other people that caused these things wrong? And is the truth actually that I am remembering it wrong? And can I reveal this? Because this isn't the shit that's actually happening, because memory is imperfect and I'm storing things based upon different trauma filters. Like, the number of layers of abstraction within this kind of thinking and these kinds of thought patterns with dealing with this is entirely new and different. And have you considered kind of creating these mapping functions to go, oh yeah, your memory's fucked up, that's not actually what happens? And if so, like, what's the downstream effect of that?
No, I have not gone there. It's hard, where you're talking about going and talking to yourself. That is a very interesting idea and it's a rabbit hole I think is worth exploring it for personally, right? And I think I can certainly add some functionality that would allow people to go there. But to your point, it's hard to know how objective it is, because there's not an arbiter.
Yeah.
The arbiter is you, who is inherently subjective. So does that, do we live in an echo chamber of confirmation bias and spiral down there further? Does it help or does it hurt? I don't.
Right. Am I just going to feed my ego?
Yeah. That lovely ego that tends to put us in precarious situations to begin with. That is fascinating, and that is an angle that I had not thought about before. But you can bet that the next time we speak, I will have played with that. I don't know that I'm going to like what I see, but that's part of this journey, right? Is eating, you're taking your medicine.
Yeah. And, sometimes you got to like put the carnival mirror up and look at yourself in that kind of distorted field to figure out who it is I actually think I am.
So, I wonder if, there's a way to, if we train this thing right and say, assume the worst.
Yeah.
Right. And you kind of come at this understanding that this thing may take liberties that makes you even worse than you were. But then you kind of overcorrect, and maybe you find yourself in the middle, and that is that's the healthy place to live.
Yeah.
Because I see that as, for me, that's the best place. When I was I was an asshole when I was younger for a long part of my life, and that I'll own that. But the best way I know to own all that is to assume the worst,
Yeah.
atone for the worst, and worst case scenario, oh my God, I made amends, and I went and I said sorry to someone for something that maybe didn't hurt them as much as I thought it did.
Yeah.
What's the harm in that?
Right.
So I think if we were to go down that, it would be, let's maybe make this person that we're talking to worse than we were. And that if we can come to terms with that, forgive ourselves for that, and move forward understanding that, then I think we're okay. It's to your point. I think if we try in our head to sugarcoat who we thought we were, then no. So I'm sure I can think of a few people in middle school and high school who would probably have that view of me that is, the worst case scenario. And then a few that, so that one might it might have to be crowdsourced to get a truly objective picture.
But does it, right?
Because it's objective. It's not objective at that point. It's a small sample size is what it is.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, but they're all subjective, right? Reality is subjective. Anytime you're
Right.
going to take human interaction and put it into it, you're going to have subjective responses. And taking
Well,
it as
I'm just thinking of like friends I have who have passed, and you go to their funerals and you hear people go up and speak, and one after another. I have a very recent example where everyone who spoke described the man that I knew. Like, same friend, same crazy, like fun, hilarious, always smile. Like, everyone had the same thing to say. One of my mentors who passed, everyone who spoke gave a different slice of his life that everyone else didn't know. And there was like 10 different people on display at this funeral. So it's interesting to consider, if you're crowdsourcing, who am I to the outside world? I am whoever I chose to project myself to be to those various people. So my work colleagues would tell you I'm one person, and my family would tell you I'm somebody else, because I'm a different person to both, right? I'm a little less likely to say something stupid at work as I am to my kids, right? So it's just interesting to even consider, like, who am I through the lens of myself or the world that I project myself into.
And this is an interesting angle.
This is going down a hole I did not think we would be going down.
But it's a know thyself argument, right?
Yeah.
Like, know thyself. Most of us don't know ourselves. Most of us don't understand our motivations, what we want to do. Like, we don't have our 5-year plan in our heads. Like, we don't do any of this mapping. And we kind of live in a society that doesn't require us to do that because we have so many distractions. But this is like an epically interesting distraction. Like, can you actually know yourself in a meaningful way and solicit feedback and get people to say, oh yeah, that's who you are? And how much of it will actually open your mind up to who you are projecting to the outside world? Because most of us don't know. Like, my kid came to me one time and said, Dad, every time you talk to me about this thing, like, it looks like you're mad. I'm like, what? Why? They're like, because you're doing this with your face and talking about this. I'm like, oh, well, but that's just because that's the way that I talk. My face is
just
expressive.
Dad face.
Right. Like, I'm not mad at all. Like, no. I'm sure there's a million things that have to do with pantomimes and everything else that you probably can't put into AI to figure out. But I'm sure there's inflection, tone, and the way that we talk and communicate. Like, the way I'm talking right now is not at all how I talk when I'm at work. Like, it's very different from how I talk with my kids. And Jeremy was one of the grooms at my wedding. He's seen me talk in these different interactions. And I have different layers, and I contain layers as an individual. But I don't know that I know myself that well. I know the personification that I push forward, and I kind of know, well, I kind of think this, but I'm going to say this.
Right. I know who I want, who I think I want to be.
Yeah. I have this self-image that I think I want to attain. Am I actually hitting that kind of number? Ooh, this sounds really, really painful for me to get. But maybe useful. You know?
Well, there's the old, right, we're our own worst critic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how capable are we of actually being the critic we need?
Yeah. Interesting. John, we could go on and on, as you can tell.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a new company idea.
We'll scrape this for company ideas. We'll feed it in ChatGPT. We'll have something launched in a week. That'll be great.
Exactly. We'll get, what is that? Lovable.dev to build us an app for it. It'll be perfect.
There we go. John, your app. Let's talk about the tool that you offer, Guardian Angels. Tell folks where they can find it and where they can find out more about you.
So it's called Guardian Angels. It's Angels is spelled AINGELS. Guardianaingels.ai is the site. It's a web application. We're working on mobile development, so be on the lookout for that. But again, I want to reiterate AINGELS. Our brain does not see that
No,
I.
it doesn't.
And I shot myself in the foot with that one. I have tried, if you see on the logo, like it's bracketed so you can see it.
Right.
I can't tell you how many people have been like, well, I've tried to go to your website. It doesn't exist. Like, no. Yes, it does.
I want to rethink that URL. You might want to workshop that one a little bit.
Yeah, I might have to go domain shopping and figure this one out. But
redirects work wonders. It's just fine.
Yeah, I was trying to be clever. I still like it, so maybe my stubborn, the self that I need to know will just stick with it. But yes, Guardian Angels, web application where I'm building a community around this thing. For a lot of people that I've met and experienced online, all of those support groups are just inundated with spammers and scammers.
Yeah.
So I've actually, and this just launched the other day, created the Army of Angels, and there will be links on the website. It is it's behind a paywall, so it's $5 a month. That $5 will get you can be used towards any subscription on Guardian Angels. But the idea is to wall off those people. The scammers aren't going to pay to be in there. I'll drop things like the actual prompts we're feeding so people can do them on their own if they want. Just resources that we can all collectively start and continue that conversation that for whatever reason we're afraid to in the wild. There's a million reasons for each person, but we're trying to build the ecosystem to get this conversation into the open. So that's linked on the site as well. If anyone's listening who is a grief therapist and wants to test this and put input, I am crowdsourcing everything. This is not me. I want this to work for the most people. And I really tried to create it with therapy in mind as a tool. We're not trying to replace therapists. We want to be part of the broader strategy for treating this affliction that is going to affect everyone.
Yeah.
So that's what we've got.
Amazing. We'll have the correctly spelled link in the show notes for this episode. You can click on that to find Guardian Angels. John, fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for your time today and for the work you're doing.
Jeremy,
Thanks,
Jason,
John.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Love to do it again sometime.
We'll do that.
Yeah, we'll do that. Sounds great.
So take care.
All right, folks, there you go. That's our conversation with John Kammer. Really great conversation. I hope you got a lot out of it. And, if you're still thinking maybe this isn't for me, maybe this isn't the thing that I need to get over my grief or to find my way through or out of it or whatever story you're telling yourself, fine. Do something else then. But sitting with the grief isn't going to work. So whether it's, screaming into a pillow, running, like going to the gym to process some of those feelings, journaling, something, you got to process that stuff, because otherwise you're going to hang on to it and it's going to get in the way of you being able to move forward and try to learn new ways to live with that grief. Because that's the thing. Grief, in my experience, I have a lot of it. I've lost a lot of people. I've lost a lot of loved ones that have been close to me, and the grief never leaves. It just takes up a little bit less space in my life. And so hopefully this is one way to help you accomplish that as well. If this conversation has been helpful for you, please do share this episode with somebody in your life who could benefit from hearing it. And as always, if you have a moment, please make sure you subscribe or leave a review, or just keep listening while you're pretending to mow the lawn or whatever it is that you're doing. Either way, make sure you take care of yourself, be good to yourself, and we'll be back in about a week at brobots.me. That's where you can find all sorts of ways to share the episode, sign up for the newsletter, whatever it is you want to do to be part of our community. We'd love to have you there. So we'll see you soon at brobots.me.
We know this podcast is amazing and it doesn't seem to lack anything, but we need a legal disclaimer. Prior to implementing anything discussed in this podcast, it is your responsibility to conduct your own research and consult your physician. You should assume that these knuckleheads don't know what they're talking about. and they're not liable for any physical or emotional issues that occur directly or indirectly from listening to this podcast.